Hello and welcome to episode 274 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. We are not here to look back. We are not here to rehash our mistakes. We are a forward-thinking show, and we're going to discuss the rest of season top 150. Joining me for these pods each week are the two young men you know, the two young men you love. It is Mike Leone of the Establish the Edge pod, of analytics directing fame, of other Virgin activities, and it is our projections lead, crushing the overlap season of NBA/NFL, Team No Sex. It is Mark Dankenbring. Leone, good morning.
I mean, Mark's fiance hasn't even joined him out in Denver yet, so he truly is on Team No Sex right now.
Yes, regardless, though, overlap season is the season of Team No Sex. Mark, how's it going?
Going well, rocking the ETR NBA sweatshirt today, just to remind everyone that we've got a lot going on. You know, we're a weekend, been firing off on the props, so if you're in a legal state, highly recommend subscribing to our props package and firing away with us.
Yeah, it's so fun. The props really are so fun. Okay, on today's show, we're going to talk player outlooks for the rest of the season. In other words, if you were drafting today, what would our rankings look like? If you're an in-season subscriber, you have access to our weekly rest of season top 150, which comes out each Wednesday, factors in injuries, buys, schedule, and of course, most importantly, role/usage changes we've seen so far. I think it's good for best ball. I think it's good for season-long trades. As Mark mentioned before we get into it, have to remind everyone NBA is in full swing. We're really trying to blast on the props market because frankly, it's so soft and I don't know like how many years it will last. So yeah, really trying to blast on that. Recommend everybody else check it out. Also DFS product up on the site. Check that out. Okay. Rest of season top 150. So we're 7 weeks in now. And like there's in fantasy, there's such a massive difference between teams on track for the playoffs and those teams that are like scuffling. You know, if you're 6-1, it's a huge difference if you are 3-4 or 2-5. And I think some of that filters down to players in real life. Like teams are starting to think about that too. Like I could see Jalen Hurts getting benched. I could see the Broncos maybe falling off a cliff. And like, does Melvin Gordon in his contract year want to play through the Broncos just getting ripped as a, 3-11 team or whatever? So I don't know how we can compensate for this in the rest of season top 150. Leone, I don't really think we can, but I do think it's something to keep in mind. How do you think about some of these situations where teams are bad and maybe getting worse?
Yeah, I mean, I know we were just talking before the show about DK Metcalf and when Russell Wilson's going to come back, and I'm a little squeamish about what happens with Seattle. You know, if they're just awful and if they don't rush Russ back. I mean, it's not too big of a concern, but it's like a tiebreaker with a lot of things. I'm in a league where a lot of teams make the playoffs and I'm a little weak at running back. I'm trying to trade for Javonte Williams. Like we already hope the rookies kind of escalate towards the end of the season. And if the concerns that you just laid out for Melvin Gordon come to fruition, it could be an absolute smash for Javonte Williams. So I think about them a little bit. It's hard though, because a lot of times NFL teams, for the most part, just try to win and play normal, like no matter what, even if it's not necessarily GTO. So, are there any other specific spots?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know about specific spots per se, but like, yeah, I mean, the data is very clear, at least on rookies, right? That like rookies perform better at the end of the season. Like we have very clear cut data on that. That's not like conjecture. I mean, post bye week for rookies, end of season for rookies, like the data is very clear there, right, Leone?
Yeah, it's very clear. I know Pat Crane for NBC Sports Edge has done some stuff on this. Jack Miller for us for ETR has done some stuff on this. Over the course of the season, the rookie success escalates. And we saw it last year was like really the kind of extreme version of it. But we had a bunch of running backs that didn't hit early, all hit at the end of the season. I mean, Akers hit at the end of the season. Swift hit at the end of the season. JT hit at the end of the season. Like it eventually, Dobbins hit at the end of the season. And it's not always going to be that binary, but last year it really was. And I do think we could see that with Javonte Williams this year. And, some of the other rookie wide receivers, I think, Rondale Moore, someone we really liked coming into the year where, how is AJ Green going to make it through a season? Like this isn't necessarily like a team stinks sort of thing, like what's going to happen, but it is there is an aging wide receiver on a team that's playing really well. And they might want to get Rondale Moore more touches as the season goes on. So it's something to be aware of.
Yeah, now that I think about this Seattle thing, I agree with you. They're 2-5, and like every game that Russ misses, they're drawing real thin to win. You know,
That's
it could be really bad. Okay.
that's the one I'm worried about. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say at a macro point of view too, just with injuries. Last year we saw McCaffrey, banged up and on IR, and the Panthers were really hesitant to bring him back because they were having a losing season. So we lost out on a couple weeks of McCaffrey, where if they were a contending team, he probably would have come back and given us some fantasy friendly weeks. So I think, we're not quite in that range just yet entering week 8, but kind of once you get to week 10, 11, and there are teams outside of the playoff race, injuries to players, just got to be a lot more hesitant there.
All right, let's get into some players here as our rest of season top 150 is updated on the site right now. Let's talk about Jamar Chase. I mean, I thought Jamar Chase would have a really good year. I thought that his competition for targets was a little bit stiff for him to really break out and be like a top 5 fantasy wide receiver. In other words, I expected T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd and Joe Mixon and CJ Uzomah and all these guys to steal enough targets from Jamar Chase to cap his ceiling a bit. However, what we've seen is Jamar Chase is going so far down the field and having such a high efficiency so far down the field. He's like breaking slates weekly now. So I don't know. I still get a little queasy that, T. Higgins gets 15 targets in a game and like Jamar Chase still performs well. I don't know how sustainable that is, though. What do you think about Jamar Chase going forward, Mark?
I'm still pretty bullish on him. I mean, yeah, he's been hyper efficient down the field. He leads the NFL in deep passing receptions and yards. Has 9 receptions for 375 yards and 4 touchdowns. Cooper Kupp's the only other one with 9 catches there. So he has been living down the field. 60% of his targets have come 10 plus yards down the field. So I think just talent wise here with Chase, though, we're really excited. Obviously the connection with Burrow is really strong. Leone was hit on this in the offseason that he could see Chase being a end of first, early second round pick. And I think moving forward, that's what we could see down the stretch here as well.
Yeah, I mean, we have Jamar Chase 16th overall, the wide receiver 5 if we were drafting today, behind only Cooper Kupp, of course, the god of the breakfast narrative, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Steph Diggs. I would personally have Justin Jefferson ahead of Jamar Chase. We have them back-to-back spots, though. I don't think it's any type of slam dunk. I'm curious, Leone, what you think here. I mean, this is a massive rise for Jamar Chase, and it's also coincided with the Bengals increasing their pass rate over expectation lately.
Yeah, so I think like before the season, the case I made for the Bengals, I wrote an article about stacking the Bengals in season long. And the case was, part of it was that they were going to throw a lot. Their pass rate over expectation would be positive and they'd run at a fast pace. Part of it was that the target shares would be really condensed, a la Carolina last year. That we've seen through the course of the season. They're well over, 60, if you look at their average target shares combined, which is a little inflated because Higgins missed a couple games that propped up Boyd and Chase some, but it's over 70%. When Carolina had 3 top 24 wide receivers, despite Bridgewater not even throwing 20 touchdowns last year, it was in the mid 60s. So we got that condensed target share. And then the other aspect of it was just that Chase and these receivers are really good. They're really talented. Chase is one of the best wide receiver prospects we had in a long time. So right out of the gate, we hit on 2 of those 3 things, which is Chase is just an awesome talent and the target shares are really condensed. The third thing we didn't hit on was the team really took it slowly, with Burrow at the start of the year. They were pretty conservative. They were running at a slow pace. They had a very negative pass rate over expectation. The good thing in hindsight, you can kind of paint a narrative though of like Burrow, they were protecting his knee and they brought him along slowly. They actually implemented some stuff, more play action and stuff that had increased the team's efficiency early on. We just didn't see the volume. Now we're coming off, their 4th straight week where they were either neutral or positive in pass rate over expectation, and they were super aggressive against the Ravens. That's 4 straight weeks of that, following 3 weeks where they were among the lowest teams in pass rate over expectation. And not necessarily that this will continue to trend upwards, but it's a sign that they're not going to be conservative at the very least. I think we're going to be neutral to aggressive the rest of the year. And I'm still investing in all these guys. I know T. Higgins has struggled, but we're okay with him in our ranks still. We moved up Burrow. So I'm still pretty in on the Cincy offense as a whole.
Yeah. Okay. I want to circle back to T when we do the discussion about Calvin Ridley's situation. I want to move on though to this Dolphins stuff, Mark, because I mean, it's been so tightly condensed between Waddle and Gesicki. But we have to note that Devontae Parker and Will Fuller have not been playing in these games. I mean, Mike Gesicki is essentially playing wide receiver, and like I love getting a chance to play wide receivers in my tight end spot. Obviously, like it's just you see what happens to guys like Higbee and Big Bob Tunyon. Like true tight ends can have really low floors when they're not scoring touchdowns, and so to get to play Gesicki or Pitts there or something like that is just such a huge advantage. But anyways, we've seen signs of life from Tua, and it's been so condensed to Waddle and Gesicki, who are both really good talents. I don't know how we factor in though when Devontae and Fuller come back, because I mean Fuller's been out for a while. I don't think he's even expected back this week. Parker seems close every week, but then he never plays. So how do we think about this in the rest of the season, top 150?
It's hard for sure, and something we're trying to factor in, but kind of at the end of the day, you have to say, okay, we've been thinking about this for a couple of weeks with Parker and Fuller, and they haven't come back. And and looking at Waddle and Gesicki, they line up in the slot over 2/3 of the time when they're out there, and Parker and Fuller are more outside receivers. So, I think we could see through our receiver sets with Gesicki kind of as the token fourth there in the slot moving forward with Miami. And they've had, a nice pass rate over expectation that we weren't necessarily expecting. Their defense has really struggled, which I also don't think we were expecting coming into the season. So, I expect Tua to continue to air it out there. Waddle and Gesicki have both performed extremely well with Tua under center. Gesicki had that goose egg in week 1, but over the last 2 weeks, he's caught 15 balls for 200 yards and a touchdown. And his ADOT has been, over 10 plus yards in every game with Tua. So I like to see that. And so, yeah, I think Gesicki should be slotted in that tight end 1 spot for you each week moving forward. And then Waddle, we were kind of debating before in the Slack where exactly he should land. I think he's in the wide receiver 3 range right now, but if the volume continues to funnel his way with Tua, we know that connection, kind of a similar college connection that we've seen with Burrow and Chase. I still like Waddle as a wide receiver 3, potentially wide receiver 2 moving forward.
Yeah, I just want to make a point about the athletic stuff with Gesicki. Like, just because you're a great athlete doesn't mean you'll be a great fantasy player, but it's really hard to be a great fantasy player if you're not a great athlete. You know what I mean? And so, like, Gesicki was literally 99th percentile SPARQ score coming out of Penn State. Like, I'm not exaggerating, one of the best athletes to ever play the tight end position. Obviously, there's more to playing the game than that, but at least gives him like a baseline to have these huge games. And so we've seen that lately. Shout out Penn State. Let's move to this Eagles running back situation, Leone. It's tough. Miles Sanders was like crying on his way off the field. And I was like, oh my God, this dude like is going to be out for the season. Like, you dude usually aren't crying from a low ankle sprain, but that's the report on Miles Sanders. Another shout out Penn State, by the way. But sounds like he's week to week, which I don't know. I would put it at like maybe 1 to 3 weeks he's out right now. This was already a running game which wasn't performing very well, but it looked like they were starting to turn around a little bit. Now they have Boston Scott, who I think Boston Scott will play like a lot of the base work, and then Gainwell will have like his role plus. So in other words, all the pass down work plus a little bit of base work. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here. We don't know exactly what's going to happen with Boston Scott versus Gainwell. We don't know exactly how long Miles Sanders is going to be out. How do you think about that in the top 150, Leone?
It's definitely a tough break for Sanders as he was starting to get more of that volume that we hope. His carry shares were 2 of his 3 highest carry shares of the year in week 6 and week 5. His target share has actually been pretty solid throughout the year, but it had escalated, like jumping Gainwell a decent bit in weeks 5 and 6. And then they head into this game against the Raiders where they actually were a little bit more committed to the run than they've been. They had a bottom 10 pass rate over expectation on the week for a team that's been very positive in PROE over the course of the season. So there were some pretty encouraging signs for Sanders where I think you still want to hold him long term, but I expect Gainwell to smash here for a little bit, for a couple weeks, as long as Sanders is out. He already seemed to be really cutting into Sanders in the red zone a decent bit. We've seen Gainwell run pretty pure on touchdowns, so I'm not worried too much about Boston Scott taking that role from him. And we already had a double-digit target share. He's got a 13% target share on the season for Gainwell. With Sanders out last week, it was 24%. So I think the short-term upside here is a lot higher than maybe even the market perceives, where if he can get 50% of the carries in a ground game that's likely going to be efficient given the rushing quarterback, and we've got a matchup against Detroit this week too, which is phenomenal. So if you're in a short-term bind, I think Gainwell is likely to be undervalued by the market right now. I think he's going to have a really strong week, and he's in a very good spot.
Yeah, that's interesting. We have Kenny Gainwell 93rd overall, the RB 32 right now. Miles Sanders 75th overall, RB 26. I think it's another case of figuring out how your team is doing. Obviously, if you have Miles Sanders and you're in trouble, like getting rid of him for somebody you can use right away makes sense. Let's go back to the Seattle stuff, man. I know we talked about it a little bit, but now I'm scared on the Seattle stuff because they're not even like trying. Like Gino, they're like using Gino like in a worse way than the Saints are using Jameis Winston. Just like they're like scared to let him throw. I mean, he had 12 completions against the Saints on Sunday. Obviously, DK Metcalf takes out the PSM and breaks out the big play. But like, man, both Metcalf and Lockett without Russ is really scary. And then we start to get into this stuff where what if Russ's finger doesn't allow him to come back, or the doctor thinks he shouldn't come back, and there are 2-8 or something like that? Then you have a real problem for Metcalf and Lockett. So yeah, it's tough. I'm going to pull up the rankings here, but what do you think, Mark, about this whole Seattle stuff?
It's been brutal for sure, and I think we're finally seeing that Russell Wilson has just covered up for so many, just kind of game plan and management mistakes there in Seattle with Pete Carroll. We obviously didn't expect it to go that well with Gino under center, but it's been very brutal. Tyler Lockett, at this point, we've kept him kind of in that wide receiver 2 range, just hoping that Russ is back in week 10 after their bye and can really turn it on. But Lockett, I don't really feel comfortable starting him right now in season long. Hopefully you have some other options that you can get out there. DK Metcalf has at least been serviceable. He caught that long touchdown, and he had 6 targets the week before that. And, as we mentioned, just a bigger body receiver that Geno Smith is more likely to target. So I'm still fine putting Metcalf in there, but I have Lockett on a decent amount of teams and think I'll be sitting him until Russ gets back.
Yeah, I mean, the difference is that DK Metcalf is way more likely to do what he did on Monday night, like take a short pass and go to the house. I mean, like Lockett is not nearly as likely to do that. He's going to need more efficient quarterback play. All right. I can't face talking to Leone about Robbie Anderson anymore. So Robbie Anderson is in this mix also, but I wanted to bring up the guys like Calvin Ridley and T. Higgins, who are, I mean, I don't want to say unquestionably talented because like I don't consider myself any kind of talent scout, but I think it's pretty widely held that Calvin Ridley and T. Higgins are very, very good NFL wide receivers. They're also getting really, really good volume. They're not scoring that many touchdowns, and really they're not getting very many yards. Both of their ADOTs are way off their career rates. Average depth of targets are way off their career rates. I think that has something to do with it, but I think there's also some short-term variance here. So, for people who have Ridley, it's been rough. Like, I have Ridley teams that are just looking really, really bad. What do you think about these two guys here? I don't want to hear your Robbie takes anymore, Leone. Let me just hear the Ridley and T. Higgins takes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm buying the volume on both these guys. I think we have, particularly on Ridley, we have a long enough track record of him being really good. And I know people might say, oh, Julio's not there now. Well, he's got Kyle Pitts smashing to take some pressure off him. And Ridley himself smashed fantasy-wise in games Julio was out last year. So, as much as you might be worried about Matt Ryan and the offense, we've seen some positive steps out of them the last couple of weeks, despite, Ridley being out one of those weeks and having a really poor efficiency game. So I would be buying low on Calvin Ridley, almost regardless of the state of my team. I think he's a really strong play. And I think T. Higgins might even come at a more affordable price tag where, because of the range he was drafted in, people are more willing to give up on a guy like that, who was taken in 5th, 6th round, depending what league you're in. And he was a boomer bust prospect who boomed year 1 and not necessarily the best of spots, given that Cincy O-line and, Burrow got hurt during that year. And the struggles are real this year. He's at 6.0 yards per target after 8.4 last year, but that stuff's pretty noisy. I expect him to regress positively. He's actually getting targeted more than Chase. So I think there's a lot of really healthy signs. And then all the healthy signs, when we were talking about Chase, about the Bengals offense in general, they apply to T. Higgins too. So he might be one of the best buy lows out there. I think our ranks where we have him 45th overall wide receiver 25 is going to be pretty aggressive relative to the rest of the market.
Yeah, and there's some guys around T. Higgins that we have in the rankings that I like also. I still like Cortland Sutton, even with Jerry Judy coming back. I still like Chase Claypool. I think Thielen is okay. For touchdowns, Marquise Brown. Obviously, all these guys in this range, I think, are pretty solid. But yeah, I mean, T. Higgins is... Yeah. I'm on T. Higgins. And then Calvin Ridley, we have up at 24th overall, still the wide receiver 9, ahead of A.J. Brown, ahead of C.D. Lamb, ahead of Mike Evans. I know that's going to raise some eyebrows there, but I think, Leone, you laid out the case for Calvin Ridley. All right. We've said it all. Actually, let me ask about this Jerry Judy thing. I know we didn't talk about this pre-show. I love Jerry Judy coming into the year. Like, I thought Jerry Judy was just going to absolutely smash. And we've seen Cortland Sutton absolutely smash. Now I'm worried that these guys are, I don't want to say cancel each other out, but they're going to kind of take from each other. Leone, how did we do the Jerry Judy Denver Broncos stuff for the rest of season 150?
Yeah, I mean, there is a concern between Judy, Fant, and Sutton. Like, can these guys be supported by Teddy Bridgewater? And we're talking about Cincinnati stuff. Teddy Bridgewater supported 3 top 24 wide receivers last year just because the target shares were condensed. So I think you're hoping the target shares are really condensed onto those 3 guys. I think they will be. Sutton's like massive upside potential, I do think takes a hit. Like, I think his air yards are going to come down. But it's been nice to see Denver at least somewhat neutral in terms of pass rate over expectation. They were a team that I was worried coming into the year might be extremely conservative, but they've been about league average in that regard. They've been about league average in terms of pace, and maybe Judy being back even encourages them to throw a little bit more. So I think these guys are going to be really stable. I just, the upside cases do come off the table a little bit, in my opinion.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. Now we've said it all. If you guys want to check out the rest of season top 150, it is up on the site right now, part of our in-season package. Be sure you are following our guys on Twitter. And by the way, I know most of you guys are on Twitter. I go on these YouTube shows, and these guys never heard of Twitter. I'm telling you, man, that's not why you're not winning. If you want to win, you got to be on Twitter. That's where it's at. Mark, tell them where to find you on Twitter.
Yeah, you can follow me at Mark Dank. Silva gave me a nice plug on Twitter, which was cool. Matthew Berry followed me, so I'm feeling like a big shot. So I'm closing in on 1,000 followers as well. So yeah, follow me at Mark Dank on Twitter.
There you go. We're gonna get Mark's Twitter going. You obviously know where to find Leone at 2 hats, 1 mic, and myself at Adam Levitan, all one word. All right, for Leone, for Mark, for my new sign, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.